I think that the welcome should take about 15 minutes. We are starting a little bit earlier. I would like to thank you a lot for being here. I appreciate the effort of getting early up and attending the first talk about gorillas. My name is Krzysztof, Chris. I've come to you from Poznań. I work for a British company named Leading Edge Forum, and I'm a researcher. Not a coach, but a researcher, and my primary job is to find and identify new practices in business and in IT, write reports on them, and basically sell those reports. Personally, I'm very interested in giant apes and how they behave and how they are similar to us. 3 months ago, I have prepared an entire presentation about it. I thought it will be quite interesting for many people, but last week I started thinking, Chris, you are going to a DevOps conference, you are going to meet the finest DevOps engineers. Will they be interested in gorillas and situational awareness? It didn't look really well. Situational awareness is a thing that is very hard to sell, or to pitch even, because there are three groups that get it, three groups of people that get it on the instinct level. The first group are people with military background. They know that if they know the map, if they know where are the troops, and if they know goals, they can succeed. Then we have computer players who have to know what is the opponent trying to do, what are the rules of the game, and how to operate in order to win. And then the third group is the extremely curious people who have enough of time to waste to actually dig into that subject. The entire rest of human population usually picks one of two approaches to situational awareness. The one is that something military I'm not interested in? And the second one is, it's not important at all. They basically dismiss the whole subject. That's why I've decided to change a little bit presentation about giant apes and remove as many gorillas as I can. I've added a little bit more controversial subtitle to the presentation, which is about which of those has the future. One of those has a very bright future, the other one does not. I've tested it with the conference organizers. I would say they weren't very enthusiastic about mentioning serverless during the DevOps conference, and here I'm aware. But anyway, I'm here. I was not kicked out, so things are good. Before we proceed, I would actually ask you for your opinion. What do you believe? Which one has the future? Is it DevOps? Please raise your hand if you believe in DevOps. Okay. Or maybe is it serverless? Okay, I assume that the entire rest doesn't want to take any risk of showing their preferences. So now a small cross-check. Out of those persons who said it's DevOps, how many of you have actually tried working with serverless for more than one project, let's say 3 months? Okay, that's quite surprising for me. Given what I have seen, my question to you would be, how can you know? Right? Because how can you know, and we will get back to this in a second, because what's the plan for today's presentation is short introduction to situational awareness, very short introduction to how human mind works and solves problems we see in everyday life, how to build situational awareness for business and for private life, and why serverless was the right answer. So, each time you face a decision, each time you have to make a choice, each time there is a challenge, opportunity, or a project to write, human mind works as follows. Here is our decision to make. So we all have our past, everything we have learned, everything we have observed, read. So we pick two most recent things that are relevant to our current decision. We form a hypothesis, and from that moment, we believe it's the only explanation of the reality around us. We pick two most recent, most plausible, pick the most recent, most plausible pattern we have recently observed. There is no rationality on it. This is instinct telling us how to proceed without thinking too much. And the problem with that is that once we make our decision how things we believe work, we completely ignore patterns and things that are right now there in the reality but don't fit our expectations. And we proceed with our ignorance for as long until something so bad happens that we can't ignore it anymore. This preference of sticking to our thinking is so strong that when radiologists were given a simple task of finding a a cancer nodule on an X-ray scan, sorry, I've got 85% of radiologists were not able to see the gorilla, which is there, but I think it's not visible, despite directly looking at it, right? And what's worse, I mean, it doesn't say anything positive about how we operate and how good we are at making decisions. If we actually think about businesses, there is one particular company I like to talk about, which is Kodak. You know, Kodak has a long history of very successful traditional film-based products. But I think it was like for 100 years, more or less. They believed that they knew that digital is coming. They prepared a plan how to switch from the traditional film-based business to digital one, and yet they failed to execute it because from year by year, for 5 consecutive years, they believed it's not now. So they have prepared the plan in the '89, and in the 1905, they have produced the best-selling camera ever and went bankrupt. And everything, despite being the company that actually invented digital photography in 1960s. Do you get the irony? They have created digital camera. They have created a plan how to make money out of digital business. They have created a service which could be today the next Instagram, yet they failed to shut down past thinking and past way of doing business. And that basically removed them from competition. But that sticking to the thought pattern is basically only a half of the problem. The other half of the problem is that such explanation of reality exists only until discussed. If I say DevOps has the future, I say serverless has the future, you say DevOps has the future, then everyone listening to our conversation at the end of today will leave this conference thinking either DevOps has the future or serverless has the future. But almost none of you will be able to hold 2 versions of reality in your mind and think this has 60%, this has 40%. You will fall back into thinking in one category and you will stick with it. For this reason, in every company where you work on a given problem, people tend to create a shared narrative, and usually the person that has the strongest personality has the dominating voice in making decision, which basically doesn't say anything good about how our businesses work. But the good thing is that since everyone is having those problems, you actually don't need to be much better to be successful. Just a small improvement makes a significant difference. So I've used the term situational awareness a couple of times. Do you have maybe idea how to define it? What actually is situational awareness? Well, we can stick to the Wikipedia definition, which is long and complicated and doesn't say a lot actually, or we can use the simplest possible explanation, which is situational awareness is avoiding surprises. If you don't know something, you know that you don't know it, and you prepare for you not knowing. Basically, you do your research or plan experiments. If there is something happening in your environment, you know that it is happening, you know what to anticipate, and you know how to prepare yourself. This is as simple as that. Now, if you think about another event, recent event, which is IBM acquiring Red Hat. Are you maybe working for those companies? Not anyone. Okay, I worked for both of them, and I can tell you that this acquisition has no sense at all. IBM is a dying company, a large one, but a dying one, which completely missed the cloud. Red Hat is quite a good open source company with quite impressive revenue stream, but everything shows that IBM bought Red Hat only for the profit, which basically means that both companies are going to die. Sooner or later, this process can take years, but I don't see a way out for them. So, if you think about situational awareness, a person with low situational awareness basically believes that when the person gets out from a helicopter, another useful metaphor, the person keeps her head down because the blades can hit the person. The person doesn't know how high are the blades. So in the case of this acquisition, you can't do anything about it, but if you would be working for Red Hat especially, your default decision would be to stick with the company because nothing bad has happened. IBM is not going to merge Red Hat in, is not going to apply its dreadful financial discipline, and is not going to fire anyone above 45 or so, how IBM used to do in the United States. You believe that things will gonna be good, and you ignore everything which says otherwise. There is medium situational awareness, because you always have situational awareness, but it can be on a different level. A person with a medium situational awareness can stand straight near the helicopter because the person knows how high are the blades. And in the case of our business case here, it means that such a person knows what is the future for the company, for both companies, and is actually looking for a different job. It can be difficult, but since you know there is no future here, you want to do something meaningful, you have to find a better employer. But then there is a high situational awareness. A person still tries to protect its head because it knows that blades, despite being high enough, can sometimes go off balance and do some injuries. And in such case, for our business scenario, you start thinking about whether there is opportunity in merging those companies for you. What kind of opportunity this is for you, and whether it will be useful for your career. And here I have to resort to Lucifer, which often asks in the TV show, what is that you truly desire? What do you want? If you want to be a successful integrator, then two companies merging together, having different technology stacks, different customers and different processors, is the opportunity for you to thrive. For as long as you fully accept the fact that after they merge, they will be in a more difficult financial position than they were before merge, right? But still, you can build your career, you can show how skillful you are. Now I will sound like a coach. This is actually stolen from the internet, and it means that if you take a slightly better decision each day, you will end up with a significantly better output over a long period of time. If you take a slightly worse decision every day, you will end up in a dramatic position. I just want to tell you that compounding plays important role in our careers, and basically the only resource that you will never get back, and which is the most important for where you will end, is time. If you make a wrong decision and spend 8 years on technology without the future, that's basically going back to junior after those 8 years. Some of you may not agree with it, because there are ways to transition to maybe not junior, but rather intermediate positions, but generally it's a wasted time, which makes your career span shorter and lets you end and allows and makes you end in a lower position at the end before retirement. So if I were to ask you, what has the future, DevOps or serverless? Your answer should be, I would imagine, I'm not sure. And it would be the best answer, because the moment you start doubting about your skills, you switch off fast thinking, which is the default human thinking process. And if you switch the fast thinking, you can apply slow thinking, which is carefully look at your environment and think what will happen in the future. Now, thinking about what will happen in the future isn't that easy, but I will try to show you how this process looks like in my work and how we do apply it for our customers. So we all start with landscape. Landscape are all those things that are there. It's competition, it's customers, it's law. Things that are there and are not going to change that much. Then we have climate. Climate are basically forces that influence the landscape. So demographics, fashion, I don't know what else, technical progress, those things change the environment about us. Then we have doctrine, which is basically about how efficient you are in your operations, leadership, the quality of your bosses, and finally there is purpose, which means what do you want to do? The most important questions at the end, what do you want to do and why? The whole process works very simple. You go from landscape, identify forces, apply best practices, and then you repeat a cycle again and again. We have a very short time, so we will be focusing only on landscape and climate. And to figure out what's the landscape, you should start with identifying a person which has something that you want. In business, it's usually a customer who has money, because you want customers' money. You should identify what is that person wants. Because if that person wants to relax and has money, then you can provide that person with something which will address that user need. And since you have something that the person wants, and the person has something that you want, you can transact and fuel exchange of goods. Here I had, we are with time. Here I had two examples of artificial user needs. One is Petrock. Have you heard about it? It's an awesome explanation. It's an awesome thing because it's a pet which doesn't require any care, right? You buy it, it sits. The thing is that the person who invented it sold it a set for $20 or so, 26 or something like that, and made a couple of $1 million in a very short time. It doesn't serve anything except it brings some joy into life. The other one are diamonds, which were basically worthless stones after the Second World War, because people invented a way of making artificial diamonds. Artificial diamonds are as useful in all technical use cases as natural one. So the company that holds the monopoly of diamonds, De Beers, started campaign Diamonds Are Forever to bind worthless stones with everlasting love. And since that time, they have successively increased the marketing campaign in terms of how much should you spend to buy an engagement ring. Initially, it was a monthly pay, then it was 2 monthly pays, in 90s it was 3 monthly pays, and right now you are supposed to spend a half of your yearly salary if you are going to engage, right? It's all the marketing of a single company. So once you identify what is that you are going to deliver to your customer, you actually can think, I will skip this slide. What do you need to actually make that thing? The customer needs a bookstore needs books, bookstore needs also some real estate, a place where the person can go. You need a book idea, you need an author. Finally, there is a publisher and a printing facility. If you look at this diagram, you can see that value is being built from the bottom to up, but money flows from top to bottom. Do you agree with that? And if you know this, if you have this visualization, you can show it to a person working with you, to your boss, and actually ask what is missing. The person may have different view on what components should be involved, right? It's a basic tool of communication, and it's 60,000 faster than words, because you can write this in a document, but nobody will read that document, right? And now I would like to get familiar with the Woods theorem, which basically says that we work in our local environments. We don't care for a global value chain. And I have a story for that, because there is one country which has one government unit which was responsible for counting documents. But they had so many documents that they put them on weights and calculated how many forms were filled. And they've attempted to do digital transformation and use digital weights instead of traditional weighing of paper, right? So some kind of automation. But then the consultants went in and asked, where do you get those papers in? From the goods in department. How do they get into the goods in department? Well, they are transported by trucks. Where do trucks get them from? Well, from warehouses all around the country. How do those forms end up in warehouses? People fill them and send them to those places. Where do people get them from? Well, from a printing facility. And where printing facility gets them? From a CRM. Do you understand where this is going? You basically could do a true transformation, which basically reduced the entire process, multi-million setup, to a single select count from a database. Now the question comes to you. Maybe not a question, but a statement from me. People who wanted to create this digital transformation, they weren't daft. They were very skilled people, but they operated within their local optimum. The only thing they saw was the expensive process, and they wanted to improve it. Looking at your value chain above and below helps you find optimizations on a much bigger scale. Now, if you look at different value chains, we have a number of things, a number of different value chains, and you can see that this one is extremely high and this one is very low. All of them involve CRM. How do you think which of those would be the simplest one to implement and to maintain? Right one. Yes, I agree. It's just a couple of components, very little work, quite easily manageable. I agree. That's a knowledge I would like to store, because we will get back when I will be proving that serverless has the future. If you have a value chain, you can easily analyze situations. What will happen with your business when there is a change? What will happen if people will stop going to bookstores and they will start using their Kindles? What will happen with real estates, with building? What will happen with printing facility, with publishers? Because those people are not going to be affected. That's the kind of analysis, a scenario analysis you can do very cheaply and very efficiently to figure out possible changes. More, you can propose an idea for your business. Let's help authors with AI and make them more efficient. It's a startup idea, right? But the question is, if you augment person's ability to write, how it will influence the entire value chain? Will it make the market bigger? Will it flood it with books and make people less willing to read because of the confusion of choice? That's all sort of questions that you can ask if you have that kind of a diagram in your front. So what value chains bring? Value chains bring two things, I think. One is the visual approach, 60,000 faster than text. The other one is scenario analysis. The next one is you think about your global optimum, not a local one. And at the end, since it's visual, since it's easy to process, it's easy to challenge, and you will start arguing inside your organization, which is a good thing. The other half, which is also important, is evolution. This is an analysis of Simon Wardley, and it basically says that everything gets boring over time. What is once your competitive advantage, due to basic laws of supply and demand, will spread across the market, and everyone will be using it. So it all starts with a genesis. Genesis is an invention of a thing, it's experiment, and the core aspect of it is that there is no market. If you have a scientist inventing a first computer, inventing maybe electricity, first car, or anything like that, there is no market because no one knows what this thing can do and how to use it. Nobody is going to buy it. Then there is a custom-built thing, which means that someone saw a potential and is trying to find a use case. But since in the past we had only an experiment, we have to build the thing by ourselves, or to pay someone for building it, right? Because there is no product yet, nobody is selling ready products, so we have to build it. This is where more software developers operate with their work. After the custom build phase, there is product and commodity. Those are more or less, as the name describe. And if you combine evolution together with the value chain axis, with the visibility, you get a Wordley map. Now just a short recap of the evolution. This is a Persian battery 2000 years before Christ, and it is believed to be the first source of electricity. In the genesis state, almost no use for anyone. Then we have Faraday's disk, then we have dynamos, and at the end we have utility network, which is power socket. So here it was a scientific curiosity, if we can talk about science. Here it was still more of a scientific curiosity, but more people could do it. This is where it was already widely used in particular niches, in industry, maybe in some richer cities. And this is where everyone is using it, and you think about it only if there is a failure, right? Because if it's a cost of doing business, then why bother? I will go fast forward on this one. The thing is that those different 4 phases of evolution, all of them has their characteristics in different categories. I don't want you to focus too much on that, but the thing is that if you have custom-built thing, you can predict that the next version of the same thing will be in the product space and how characteristics will change. Would you agree with that? If you have... okay, it's too far away. I will get back to that. So basically what evolution brings, it's predictable patterns of how things are going to change, and unknown estimation, because if you have genesis or custom built or a product, there is still room for change, and you have no idea, and nobody has, how things will change in the future. It's unknown, and this is something that you have account for in your preparations, in your project plan, in your approach to work. So with what I have said, another important bit of knowledge. If you have 2 solutions doing exactly the same, but one is using custom-built components and the other one is using commodity components, which one is easier to create? Commodity, of course, because things here are not changing. Things here are familiar to everyone, so there is little cost involved into managing those, whereas in this space, those things are expected to change. By using those components, which are quite immature, you are risking creating a spaghetti monster in your organization instead of modular modular solution. This is also an important part. So let's move to anticipation. If you have a, let's say, user need, which is to move from point A to point B, you can use a car, which is currently a product because you buy it, you go to a shop and you buy it. But in order to use a car, you have to know some car owning practices, how to maintain it, how to insure it, how to drive it, and stuff like that. The thing is that what we expect is that cars, since they are in product, they will shift to the as-a-service utility. Elon Musk talks about it from time to time. You can agree with him or not, but we will see cars as a service in the same way as we see right now bikes as a service. What that will happen, what does it mean, is that because of the significant change of characteristics, all the knowledge about owning a car will become useless. Would you agree with that? And since it will become useless, people will learn how to use cars which are available as a service. How to minimize costs, how to increase availability, how to increase, how to move faster from point A to point B. You will see a whole bunch of car using hacks. But the thing is that this part will die off, and this part will spread and become more mature, reaching eventually the status of being the best practice in this space. So what we have just learned is coevolution of practice, which says each time there's a significant change of characteristics, all associated practices must change. With that in mind, we are approaching, I think, the final answer I should deliver, which has the future? Serverless of DevOps. So let's start. As you are DevOps engineers, or as I assume that you are DevOps engineers or working in this space, your primary customer need is to do business. It's what your customers want. For that, you need to build applications or let your teams build applications. For that, you need some frameworks. For that, you need operating system, and for that you need computing power. Very simplified view. If you put it on a worldly map, remove the do business because that's not relevant for our context, we have the build applications thing, and we have the rest of the stack. Can you try to guess which year it is? I think this is important. Compute in the product rental, where you had to own your server or rent it. It should be pre-Amazon era. What we have to also add to this is that you have some practices. You have software development best practices, and you had ITIL at that time, which was basically about managing computers and operating systems which were hard to get and hard to install because it took a couple of weeks to spin a new instance, right? What happened is that with the advent of cloud, properties have changed. It's still the same computing power that was delivered by server. The contract did not change. But since characteristics changed, we saw the death of ITIL. I call it death because got significantly lower usage, and the emergence of the DevOps practice, right? We are talking early cloud 2000, I think 7. Over time, ITIL disappeared. Is anyone ITIL certified here? Okay. You can see one person. And DevOps got mature and became the de facto standard of modern software development practices. What happened next is that the operating system was changed from product rental to commodity space, and we could put here cloud native, containers, and all that stuff, which basically means that each time you need an environment in which you will run your frameworks, you can easily get one. And what we can see right now is the change in frameworks, because frameworks which are available as libraries are become increasingly exposed as services through Lambda, through OpenWhisk, and whatever serverless environment we can see. I mean, function as a service. And because of the change of characteristics of the underlying component, frameworks go from product or rental. Things in the software development practices become less relevant to our environment, and new thing emerged, which is called serverless. And right now, we see it getting more and more mature and slowly entering the space of software development. This is the state we expect in the next couple of years, and with that in mind, a question appears: what will happen with those? You have said that shorter stack takes a preference on a higher stack. You have said that things on the right are more useful for developing applications than things on the left. So with serverless, you get everything isolated at that level. It's just the runtime environment exposed by your cloud provider, and nobody cares what's happening below. Which means that there is still room for DevOps, but people working in DevOps should look for a company that delivers those frameworks as a service, because there is no point in doing it again and again for every project you are doing. Right? So the question becomes, because of the heavy investment of companies like Google, IBM, Red Hat, in all those things which are invisible after serverless appears. Those companies invest a lot in Kubernetes, Docker, stuff like that. The question is, for how many years, or how many years it will take before those companies will have to catch up with financial reality. And financial reality is that this appears to be cheaper than owning and maintaining the whole stack. So with that, the key to building situational awareness is as follows. First of all, you need to identify your stakeholders and keep their needs above everything else. You need to accept uncertainty. Not everything can be known in advance. There are things that you don't know, nobody knows, and you have to prepare your plan for things, for unanticipated things. Evolution can help you with that. Each time you make an assumption, you should make it explicit in your value chain. If you believe this is the way forward, say it and see what others will say. There is nothing set in stone, right? If you have a component which is a product, it will change in a commodity. Sooner or later, you have to be prepared for it. You have to do your scenario analysis and figure out how things are going to change. And finally, this is not a one-off exercise. You need to do it continuously and review your maps, your plan on weekly basis, on monthly basis, whatever. But you need to stop thinking, you need to stop fast thinking and book time for your conscious analysis of your environment. That would be actually the action number one I would recommend to you. Book each Friday, each other Friday, 1 hour and think about how your environment is going to change. And I think we have arrived to the end of the presentation. I have a few backup slides. Do you have any questions for what I have said? Yes. Nope. No. Actually, but I understand the question. The thing is that DevOps, as being a framework of a lower order in the value chain, lower order meaning lower, until frameworks become utility and isolate it from customers, it gets some exposure to higher order value chain, right? And the moment here appears the isolation layer, it will remove DevOps visibility to what's above. But there are common things between them, like let's say continuous delivery, reducing iterations and stuff like that. But I would say those are generic framework properties in the world of software development than something attributable specifically to DevOps. Does it answer your question? Thank you. What else? If you have no questions, I have prepared a backup slide. A backup slide which can be useful. Do you have idea what it is? It's a business idea. And this is a person, this is a company called Netlify. Maybe you have heard about them. They've basically spotted that a lot of people is doing again the same task of creating a routing mesh, which is switching test version of your application with your running application, with production and stuff like that. And deployment pipeline, which is all about keeping the consistency of your file in production and in those working environments. And since they believed that many people are doing the same thing, they basically took it and created a product version, and right now they're charged for they automated this stuff and charge for it. As simple as that. If you see many people doing the same thing, you can automate things, and it's basically the simplest way to pitch your idea to a venture capital. And one more, let's say, backup slide, or a couple of them. If you have your value chain and you map your entire company, and your company is large enough, you can find that some components are done again and again by different teams. For a sufficiently large company, you can find a component implemented 6 times by different teams. But that's a rule of thumb, because in a bank you can find 14. Things go up because typical government can have 120 or so workflow systems. Global energy company had 380 ERP systems. That's not bad. Global finance company had more than 1,000 risk management systems. Now imagine the amount of wasted labor that goes each month into reporting that risk, integrating it and preparing reports for the board. And the absolute hit is that a global defense company had more than 2,000 accounting systems and at least a dozen of initiatives to reduce that duplication. Independent initiatives. The team had no idea they are doing the same job on a higher level. Discovering those things requires conscious effort and requires developers stop wanting to build things on their own. Right? With that, I would say thank you. If you have any questions, I will be around here. We can discuss this in smaller groups if you want. Thank you.